I'm Troy Olson, and for the past 4 years, I've been writing on my Substack entitled A Republic, We Will Restore It, a nod to Benjamin Franklin. I'm a son of America who has had a foot in both parties throughout my voting lifetime and civic involvement. Former Democrat, now populist Republican. I'm an Army veteran and the co-author of the book The Emerging Populist Majority with Gavin Wax. I was born in a small town in rural Minnesota and now live in the largest city in the United States, New York City. I've been here a decade now. It's been a popular phrase for decades to speak of how divided this country is politically and culturally, but I'm of a different mind on this, about this long realignment. I believe we're being resorted into where we're supposed to be. And so this is where I'm at, and this is the place that I'm coming from. So this week, last week, there was this phrase that kept popping up, and it's been repeated throughout the last week, a Democratic Tea Party. There's been this Democratic civil war brewing up over Chuck Schumer's endorsement of the CR, which is largely locking in the spending levels from last year and moving it forward. And so he looks very much a fish out of water and a man out of his time as minority leader. So this was an interesting phrase to me because I asked myself, hasn't this happened already about 3 times before in my lifetime? To recap on that phrase Tea Party, it refers to the Republican Tea Party of 2010 and the midterm wave that it brought about. And in that era, there was the young guns of Paul Ryan, Eric Cantor, and Kevin McCarthy, who were sort of the establishment's idea of the future of the party. And they're all gone now. The party of Mitt Romney, John McCain, George W. Bush, all gone. And the start of that populist wave, those movements, and to primarying people really starts with the Tea Party. It has its roots before that, as we talked about in the book, but it especially began in earnest in 2010 and then went through Trump's 2016, 2020, and onward campaigns. But what was very fascinating about this idea of trying to do primary challenges within the Democratic Party is that I have seen these calls 3 times before. I've seen these grassroots movement at least 3 times before. The first was Occupy Wall Street, which happened simultaneously to the Tea Party for the most part. Obama turned Obama for America, his campaign arm, into Organizing for America after he became president, and then basically shut it down and brought his re-election campaign entirely in-house, shunning the grassroots just as much as Mitt Romney and the Republican establishment shunned the Tea Party that brought them into power in the House with the 2010 midterm wave. Now, the second Tea Party I can recall that I think fits the bill for what's being asked for was the Bernie Sanders campaigns, the movement around his 2 primary campaigns, but especially in 2016. You can agree or disagree on the merits of Bernie Sanders' ideas in many ways, and I certainly have, but you must admit it had a perspective on economics at least. It had a perspective and an alternative path to put forth on foreign affairs and America's role in the world. And then after 2016, after the election, there were many or sizable Tea Parties on the Democrat side and especially on the left started up after that surprise victory in 2016, a surprise to the establishment in the coasts, but very much welcomed result for much of the heartland. And I remember one shorter-lived and lesser-known one. It was called Rebuild the Hope, and it was started up by former Obama campaign staffers. And I looked at the campaign, I looked at their platform, I looked at their focus, and it had nothing on the economy, nothing on matters of foreign policy, on war and peace. If you're wondering how the professional, finance, and tech donor class can so easily dictate Democratic policy on economics, and former Republican neoconservatives can so easily do so on foreign affairs, it's because it was right there for the taking. If one can be chosen from all those groups, though, to qualify after 2016 as sort of another Tea Party, I think it would be the Women's March itself that started up after Hillary Clinton's loss to Donald Trump. And arguably, this last one was the only movement that had any long-lasting effect on the Democratic establishment part. There have been other broad-scale social movements that could also be categorized as Democratic Tea Parties over this time period, but that's the one I think from this era that should get the nod. Yet arguably, the only lasting effect any of them had has been a cultural and a social one. This is the only area Democrats budge on, and they budge on it all the time. And this is really why the cultural and global left in the United States is truly finished. Yet another Democratic Tea Party will merely pull the party further to the left on cultural and social issues. And this is the only place that ever does seem to budge. Meanwhile, there's no economic plan, there's no viable foreign policy. These areas get filled out with out-of-date slogans at best and occupy zero time of the public discussion at worst. The Democrats have lost families. The coming intra-party civil war, or asking for a Democratic Tea Party, if you will be merely that Spider-Man pointing meme of professional class people barking at aspiring professional class people and trust fund activists. This coming intra-party civil war won't be about substance, for that's already been decided on who this party is going to be. This has been happening the last few decades. I'm going to name some names for you. President Donald Trump, RFK Jr., Tulsi Gabbard. Every single one of these people were Democrats at one time in their lives, some of them as recently as last year. Take it from me. I spent maybe a decade on some level trying to organize and spend my civic participation time within the Democratic Party, and it was a waste of time. They don't want anyone that no one has sent, and they certainly don't want people that look like me anymore. However, they do feel entitled to our votes, and there is no one that they hate more than a former Democrat. Sure, they'll cry bully their way, they'll send you hate messages and hate mail, and instead of the struggle sessions they hold when they think they're heading for forever power, they'll instead hold rage sessions where they yell into Lake Michigan or Lake Superior. But I want to end with some optimism. If I were still a Democrat, what would I say? And actually, as a patriotic American who wants two viable and patriotic political parties, I'll say it right now. What is instead needed is a new Whig party, the Henry Clay American system from the 19th century that focuses and stresses internal improvements. A more patriotic opposition would be an actual answer to America First. And like all of those alternative paths you're not taking, Democrats, you need to moderate yourselves on cultural and social issues. And it is in this area where I think that they'll fail big time. It took 3 straight losses by large margins to get to a Bill Clinton and the Great Accommodation of 1992. By that time, the party just wanted to win. And I think they'll have to be at least one more of those losses before it arrives at that place again. And I'll continue to give free electoral advice to the Democrats because as a patriotic American, I want a better opposition. And as a partisan, I'm pretty sure I'll be entirely ignored on this anyway. Attitudes and ideas are not going to improve until more losing occurs for the Democrats. This is not just a brand problem. This is an attitude problem. This is an ideas problem. So this is where I'm at this week, and this is where I'm coming from.